Welcome to the Domain Name Wire podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Alleman, and this is episode number 546. My guest on this week's show is DNJournal editor Ron Jackson. We're going to discuss this year's top sales through the first half of the year. Sales are up big time, as Ron explains. We run through the top sales and talk about how the domain names are being used. You'll see some themes that you should keep in mind for your own domain investing. First, a word from our sponsor. Our sponsor this week is Sav.com and its domain name transfers. Have a lot of domain names coming up for renewal? We'll save money by transferring them to Sav.com. Transfer.com's for only $9.65, .org for $10.52, and .net just $12.12. Plus, they don't raise your prices a lot at renewal. Get started transferring your domains to Sav and saving money. Go to sav.com/DNW/transfer. That's sav.com/DNW/transfer. Well, have you heard the news? Domain Name Wire now has its own app. It loads stories lightning fast. You also get access to exclusive expired domain and auction picks. Once you download the app, look at the bottom of the app for a link to those auction picks, as well as a tab that shows the top stories on the site ranked by views. There's also easy access to all podcast episodes. You can get the app by searching in the App Store for Domain Name Wire, or even easier, if you have an Apple device, go to dnw.com/Apple, or if you have an Android device, go to dnw.com/Android. And hey, if you want to be a great friend, please leave a positive review. Some news from the domain business from the past week. One of the top sales of the year that Ron and I will discuss momentarily is Commerce.com. I scooped a while ago that the buyer was BigCommerce and that it paid about $2.4 million for the name. The Austin, Texas-based competitor to Shopify just last week launched a new brand on the domain name. It is the parent brand to BigCommerce and a couple of other companies. Now, Commerce.com is obviously a fantastic domain name, but I think this overall brand it has chosen is fairly generic, which could make it difficult to get the brand associated with just that one company. In other news, last week, ICANN sent a breach notice to Webnic, saying that the registrar hasn't properly and timely responded to DNS abuse reports. The registrar has been around for a while and is fairly large, with about 500,000 .com domains under management. It focuses on the Asian market. Domain transaction volume decreased at Escrow.com in Q2 compared to Q1, at least as far as dollar volume was concerned. Although it's worth noting that Q1 of this year was a good one. So when you combine both of the first quarters of this year and compare them to the first half of last year, it's actually up 9.3%. The company handled about $197 million of domain transactions in the first half of this year. On last week's episode, I talked to Carlos Armada of Name.com about how AI is changing how domains are registered. So check out a post on DNW from July 29th, where I provide some quotes from Verisign about what it thinks will happen as AI becomes more prevalent. Speaking of Verisign, Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway sold a third of its stake in the company. It had amassed 14.2% of the company's shares and now has less than 10%. Verisign said the sale was to get Berkshire below the 10% threshold in which extra reporting and compliance requirements kick in. There were a lot more stories in the domain business last week, so go to domainnamewire.com to check out the latest. But now, let's chat with Ron. My guest this week is Ron Jackson. He is the publisher of DNJournal. Ron, welcome back to the show.
Hey, I'm happy to be back, Andrew. Always a pleasure to talk with you. And since it's every few months, it seems like we've always got new things to talk about. And that's certainly going to be the case today.
Absolutely. We are going to talk about the first half of 2025. And as I think hopefully everyone listening knows, Ron tracks domain name sales. Every other week, he publishes a domain sales report on DNJournal.com. And then there's also a year-to-date list. And we'll be going through some of the names on that list today to talk about how much they sold for, how they're being used, that sort of thing. But I was hoping we could start out with maybe your thoughts or if you have any data on how this year is going so far.
Yes, if people are regular readers of the report, they know over the past several reports, probably late spring and all summer, that I think the one constant comment is just that things are booming, just anecdotally. And I didn't, until we got ready for this show, really break out the numbers. But it's just what I was seeing on our biweekly charts. I'm going, man, things are really hot right now. And so it was interesting to me as well to get all the data back out and go through it and see in real dollar terms where we are versus the same point in time last year. So in the first half of 2025, sales reported to us, and if people aren't familiar with the report, they should know that our parameters to keep the report of manageable size, we only track .com domain sales of $2,000 and up. All other TLDs, 1,000 and up. Those are what will go into our charts. So there's a big universe of lower value sales that aren't in the total value numbers. So it's just to put that out there so people know what we're talking about. But in the sales at those levels reported to us that you've seen in the reports, we had $48.7 million worth of domain sales reported in the first 6 months of 2025. So I look back at the first half of 2024, which I kind of thought was a decent year. I never felt that it was, a subpar year by any means. But the first half of last year, the number was only $30.9 million, which means we saw the number go up by 58% in the first half of this year over the first half of 2024.
Yeah, now let me think here. I'm just thinking back to 2024. Oh, no, okay. I was going to say we had kind of one of those outlier sales so far this year, icon.com for $12 million, but well, I'm not sure last year. When did rocket.com sell?
Yeah, Rocket actually happened in October. So, and outliers are always definitely a key to look at when you're looking at dollar volume. But we did have Icon this year at $12 million. And in the first half, we've had a couple of $2 million sales. And we've also had 3 that hit $1 million or more. But last year they had Rocket, but they also, earlier in the year, in the first half, they had gold.com at 8.5 million there. So if you look at the next 5 sales after Icon this year, gold would have made up for all of those and a little bit more. So both years, even though we're talking about the first half of last year, have had some outliers. I think, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later, there's, I think there are a lot more outliers that are going to be coming in the next few months of deals that are done and are going to get announced. That's why I think the year in the end is going to be colossal.
Yeah. Well, just eyeballing. So this year to get into the top 10, and we're only halfway through, it's 600,000. Whereas last year, the top 10 at the end of the year was 450. So I think, that kind of gives more fuel to the fire here, that it's been a great start to the year, at least at the high end, for sure.
Right. Well, and that's a good point too, at the high end. And when we talked about outliers, the other thing that's good to look at is the value per transaction. So you take, the outliers out of that. So what happened in the first half of last year, we had something was like 3,000. Let me double check the number here before I say this. We had, the first half of last year, we had 2,300 transactions reported that I logged for our charts.
That met your minimum. So 1,000 for non-coms, 2,000 for comms.
And 2,000 for comms. First half of this year, we've had 3,000 transactions, which is a jump of 21%. Well, actually, that's not in the number of transactions. That's probably about the same. But the important number there is the value per transaction. So first half of last year, of those 2,300 transactions, the value per transaction was $13,434. Now you come to this year, and the value of the 3,000 transactions we've had reported in the first 6 months was $16,233. That's the 21% jump in the average value per transaction that we've seen in the first half of this year versus the first half last year.
And those are averages, is what you're saying?
Those would be averages, correct.
Okay. So we've also seen, a 30% jump, just doing some quick math here, in the number of transactions that meet your threshold, and then 21% in the average. And of course, averages, again, you do have those big sales in there, but all signs are pointing to up, which is fantastic.
Yep.
Any other data, kind of overall data about the first half of the year?
Not in terms of bulk data, but I think the obvious thing that comes up is .ai and how that's just gone bonkers this year. I mean, it was already that movement was already starting to go last year, but this year it's just nuts. So you see that particularly on the CCTLD charts. We report a top 20 biweekly, as also track our top 100 there. And it's gotten to the point on the top 100 for the year where other CCTLDs that are healthy and would normally be on there, .de and some of these other ones, .co.uk, they get squeezed completely off the chart because the numbers are so big on even the mid-level .ais that there's not room on the top 100 for sales that would have been there in the past.
Yeah, so we're recording this on July 21st, and just looking at the top 10, there's only one that's not a .ai. And then, as you mentioned, even just kind of going down the list, although some others, trickle in here, I mean, it is just completely dominated by .ai domain names. So
the thing about that is I just keep wondering, you keep looking for the fever to break a little simply because there can only going to be so many corporations, the users of top level domains. I mean, there'll be smaller operations as well, but eventually things consolidate. And just how much business is there out there to support that level of domain names that are being bought at very high prices? There's startups galore, obviously, so they use a big chunk of their startup money for it, and a lot of those will fade away in the face of competition. But, there's nothing that in 20 years that we can really point to that I think's been anything like it. When I remember the China boom where they were dominating the numbers, but as far as anything ever remotely challenging .com, this is a first.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And I think one of the open questions there is eventually, to what extent do you need to advertise that's related to AI? And so does it make sense? And will some of these companies then go after the .com at some point too? If they've spent 50, 100,000 on the .ai, will they want to get the matching .com at some point? So that'll definitely be an interesting interesting thing to keep an eye on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We've done this in the past is you've kind of introduced each sale, and then we've looked at how it's being used right now. If it is, people will see some trends, even for non.ai domains, as we go through some of these and see how they're being used. But why don't we kick that off? What was the top?
All right. Well, if you and people, what we're looking at here is the DNJournal's year-to-date top 100 chart, which is always available on the website. And there's a link on the homepage if you want to review the top 100, not just for the all extension list, but then you'll see another list for CTTLDs, another separate list for non.com GTLDs. So Andrew and I are going to look at the top sales here in the all extension category, regardless of extension, what the big sellers were. Right at the top has been the 800-pound gorilla of this year so far, anyhow, and that's icon.com that sold for $12 million. I had actually took a glance at the homepage, Andrew, but I didn't look into it carefully. What are you seeing there?
Well, so it's an AI ad maker. And so, obviously people are using AI for social media posts or doing it for advertising, that sort of thing. Just looking at this, he charges $39 a month for this kind of all these AI-based ad products. And so, you do the math there. He must be selling a lot of subscriptions or planning on it to pay that sort of money for this domain name. It's pretty phenomenal. And this is an example. This is a .com domain, but it's AI-driven, right, this purchase. And so pretty surprising. And, there were some big names involved in this sale too, which, I think Andrew Miller's name might come up a few times on this. He's with Hilco Digital. I think Loomis helped out on this sale as well. That was a big one. It's really looking at it, it's like, okay, I guess this guy's doing really well with this product.
I know those kind of numbers. Recouping the money is obviously going to be a long-term project, we would think, unless there's some secret sauce there that's just going to blow up in the next year or two.
Yeah. And, the person who, posted about buying the domain name for $12 million on his Twitter account, that tweet X, whatever you call it now, has been viewed 565,000 times. There's some advertising. There's definitely some advertising right there.
And when you have the money to pay that much for a domain, a lot of these have become trophy assets where If someone, it's obviously got great inherent value, but the add value, as you mentioned, and just a prestige that's associated with it, it's like being Mercedes or BMW or something like that in the car market. It's to have a domain like that.
And this guy's name's Kinnan. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct, Davison. He previously solo founded a company that he said had $20 million in annual recurring revenue. He's done well. He has some money there, but it is pretty phenomenal. So how about number 2?
Number 2 is commerce.com. Beautiful name. And that one was sold by Larry Fisher and Ari Goldberger, who Larry happens to be the subject of the current cover story at DNJournal. He's been one of the great brokers forever, ever since I started back in 2004. His name is always out there, and Ari's as well. So just another great sale in a long list of them that they've had.
And this one, so, you reported $2.2 million, and sometimes the report comes in from the seller, and there's maybe what they got from the domain. I believe that this is actually $2.444 million, because I was sleuthing through some Q1s and noticed that BigCommerce, which is kind of a Shopify competitor, reported that in Q1 they spent that amount of money on a domain name. And they are actually, right now, it's behind a password, but they are the buyer here of commerce.com. So connecting the dots there, I imagine, that's about a 10% commission on top of that they probably paid to someone, whether it was a buyer, broker, or someone else.
Yeah, so I think I have to apologize here. Andrew, you had sent me a note about that, and I thought, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And I had intended, and I didn't even realize it now, to contact Larry about it, who was part of the sale, to confirm that so we could update the chart. And then when I was getting ready to call, Larry was in Italy, was on vacation with his wife. So I thought, I'm not going to bother him then. And this is several weeks ago when you contacted me. So I never got back to him. So I think you could be absolutely right about that. And now that you've refreshed my memory, I will get back to Larry.
Yeah, reach out to him. I know Larry's had a lot to celebrate this year, so he's been kind of hard to pin down. I know he's got some other big sales I'm sure we will eventually hear about here. So, but I'll be curious to see what BigCommerce does with it. It doesn't make sense to me that they rebrand, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, BigCommerce is now that it's established, it's a more memorable brand than just commerce, right? So it'll be really interesting to see what they do. I've been tracking the domain for the past month or so. There's just a little password protection on it. So they're clearly developing it, and we'll see what happens probably later on this year. So
yeah, that's a wonderful name for sure.
Number 3.
Yep, that is Fuse.com. Everyone asked about the odd number on this sale. It was charted at $2,129,509. And that extra money came from brokerage fees that we typically, if I know what the buyer paid is the figure that will be our go-to if we haven't. That's what it cost them to acquire it. Yeah, sometimes we only have the net. There are occasions where a broker may have sold something, particularly with some of the larger platforms. I've had people tell me that for whatever reason with GoDaddy, they didn't know exactly what the commission was that they got. And we only get the net figure. But if I can get the total, and that's what this was in that case that came, and then again, this is another one of the Andrew Miller sales that he did on behalf of Braden Pollock Fund, and also QEIP.com was involved in that. But that's the reason for the odd numbers, is because everyone's going, well, how did they arrive at that figure in their negotiations? But it was basically a $2 million sale with the fees tacked on.
And we're going to hear Braden Pollock's name a couple times today, too. He's had a heck of a year.
Unbelievable year.
Yeah. And I think part of that, he has a relationship with Hilco Digital. He's actually an investor and they broker his name. So, just kind of seeing Hilco Digital has definitely had an impact here, I think, on some of these high-end sales that they've been working. This particular domain isn't resolving yet. And let me just check one other thing while we're chatting here, just to see if there are any clues as to the buyer. I don't remember Braden also saying anything about it and who the buyer was, although for one of his later ones, we do know the buyer, but so no clues right now. So it'll be interesting to see who forked out over $2 million for this domain later on, probably this year. So
we'll see a number of those. We always do, particularly, it's a huge investment. And these sales occurred here in 2025 within the first 6 months, since we're talking about first half. So they got a big project in mind. They're not always ready to hit the ground running with the project once they've secured the domain. So it's not uncommon. A lot of people will say, well, I can't believe it's sold for that because there's nothing on it. But a lot of these things do take some time to roll out to see what is going to be there.
Now, one way, one clue here is if you search for companies that have raised money, there was a company that in April raised a company called Fuse that raised $6.6 million. Looks like a payments company. Now, that would be, I know you only report like full cash sales, not payment plans. That would be, quite a bit of the money that they just raised. But, maybe it's in, maybe it's not. We'll find out. We'll find out soon. If it is, that's pretty gutsy putting a third of your raise right into a domain name. But we will find out probably later on this year. So
yeah, the one to play out still.
Yeah. And so number 4 here is actually, again, we're recording this on July 21st. It was when it came in this month. So it wasn't technically the first half of the year, but may as well talk about it. So what's number 4 on the list?
Yeah, actually, and also what we do, we're reporting slightly in arrears, and that I cut off when our data comes, which is usually the Sunday before. So this was reported from our standpoint in a period where the sale arrived. I can't remember. It's stated on the chart what the cutoff was.
Sure. So it probably happened in the first, but it didn't get put on the first.
Exactly, right. Yeah. And that's when I first got the number on it as well. So yeah, anyhow, that's another one. There's Andrew and Braden again, and in this case, David Clements at Brannan's was involved, I think, on the buyer side of that transaction. Andrew represented Braden on the sell side, and that was a nice $1.5 million sale.
Yeah, sword.com. And it's not developed yet, but we do know the buyer because David Clements mentioned it is Sword Health. And they have been using the domain name swordhealth.com. They've raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They are a unicorn, and they're doing artificial intelligence in the healthcare world.
Oh, wow.
So for those tracking at home, at least 2 of the top 4 sales are related to AI, even though there's no AI in the domain name. Another phenomenal sale from Braden's portfolio, and another AI-related domain sale. So
right, there seems to be a theme here.
Yes, I think that and one other topic will come up as far as industries, if you will. So let's see, what's number 5?
5 is a rare 2letter.com sale. Those themselves are very limited number of assets always, so we don't see many sales in them. And this one is a nice one, gx.com, $1.2 million. That sale was done at CEDO.
And, I never know when I see these 2-letter domain names, even at what seems like a lot of money, if it's an investor or, especially some of the Chinese investors, or if it's an end user sale. And this domain isn't resolving right now. So, it's resolving to an index page. I'm really curious about this one. It does show a listing here on GoDaddy for the domain for $3 million. But, who knows if that's new or, if it's the buyer who's trying to then turn around and sell it or not. I don't remember reading about this one, but I know Jack
at DN.com.
Yeah, sometimes makes big transactions. I don't recall him writing about this one, but it's possible. But we'll see what happens there. So
yeah, it's one of those assets also that it could go for more than that. I could see it if a very well-heeled investor doing that. I could definitely see them making money on it. As we learned over the years, even the best names can sit for a long, long time before the buyer comes along. So, you have to have the resources to put that much at risk, unless for a lot of the Chinese buyers, they just love those 2 and 3letter.coms. For them, that's an ultimate trophy asset too. I know, Jack, that we're speaking of, Jack Dye from DN.com. He's like one of those guys that just loves the 2letter.coms. They grow up dreaming to own one of those. And so it's got some value around it from that standpoint as well.
Yeah. And X is popular with crypto exchanges, so there might be something there as well. All right. Coming in at number 6.
And our last 7-figure one so far in the first half. And in terms of publicly reported sales, there are a lot of sales, by the way. And again, I try to always bring it up in the article, but obviously what we know is only what's publicly reported. But we know from talking to a lot of buyers who have NDAs that there's so much more going on, even at this level, that we're not told about, may never be told about, because the parties to the sale, for good reason, want to keep that information private. So anyhow, this is the last seven-figure one on the current top 10, and that is Slash.com. I wonder if that's the guitar player from Guns N' Roses. I haven't had a hit in a I not sure.
Yeah, I don't think the Spotify royalties are that good. So
yeah. That's Snagged.com did that sale, really?
Yeah. Snagged is a domain buyer broker. Rob Schutz is the founder there. If you're interested in learning more about him, he's on Domain Name Wire episode number 514 from this podcast back in December 23rd of last year. And this one's interesting. So again, you see this time and time again, it's these companies that raise big rounds that make the big purchases. And Slash just raised a $41 million Series B, and they are trying to redefine business banking. So their whole pitch is that business banking is kind of, everyone, you go to Bank of America, that sort of thing. They don't customize it to what your business is. And so they're trying to say, hey, you're an e-commerce company, you have different needs than a marketing agency and that sort of thing. So it's a pretty interesting play here, and obviously investors think it's interesting. Let's see, looks like they're issuing payment cards, so they're kind of doing like business credit cards and that sort of thing and helping people manage all of that, cashback cards, that sort of thing. So pretty interesting play here. I'm just kind of looking through their site, the different things here. So cashback cards, that sort of thing, FDIC insured, of course.
I like the name for a banking company because you think of slashing prices or costs. It's for me, a financial services company. It's a great name and so memorable, and it's so action oriented. I think that's a wonderful name for their use.
And it's got kind of a tech angle to it, and HTTPS/. It's one of those things too. Like if you own this domain, this probably isn't what you would have thought of as your potential buyer, right? You just never know. You never know.
Yeah, it could have been a horror movie trailer ad on television or something like that.
I can tell you movies don't pay much to buy domains. So
we know
just
that.
ask Bill Sweetman. He's done a lot of analysis of that. But yeah. Okay, let's move on. Number 7.
Yep, there's another one for CEDO, which is Double.com. That was Mark Goriafi brokered that at $980,000.
Yeah, his name is going to come up a couple times today, too. He has really been pushing hard. Anyone who's on social media, it's hard to miss him.
He is a marketing champion for sure. And he's a great guy, too. So I think that's why it's successful for him. Some people would look and say, oh, maybe that's over the top. But Mark actually used to do marketing for professional wrestling for the WWE. So if you know how flamboyant they are, and he kind of carries that along, but he's such a nice guy, too, that he doesn't come off, that's a thing that could come off as being obnoxious if you weren't a really good guy and people understood what you were doing with it. So he's popular with everybody in the business, and a very smart marketer. He gets his name out there. He's attracting clients and he's making some big sales.
And just working really, really hard. It makes a difference. Now, I don't know who bought this one. I haven't seen any clues on this one yet, so we'll have to see if it gets developed later on this year. But we will be hearing Mark's name again as well as we go through these top sales. Number 8, this is an interesting one.
That is Spend.com. That's another very nice name. That 802,500, and it looked like that name was allowed to expire.
Yeah.
With a drop catch.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Dropcatch caught this name. Talk about kind of winning the lottery as a business when you catch a name like this. But now, granted, they have over 1,000 registrar accreditations and millions of dollars of annual just overhead fees. But this was interesting too because I know there were multiple bidders over $500,000 for this domain name, and Dropcatch instituted some kind of verification to make sure that no one was bidding up the domain who didn't have the money for it. So they did like proof of funds and all that sort of stuff before anyone could bid on it. And this gets into the crypto space, which is another theme here. So Spend from any wallet. So it's kind of a cashback credit card that's rewarding you in crypto. And it's interesting to see a name like this being bought on the expired domain market where someone's, I don't know that this was a rebrand. I don't believe it was, or someone who upgraded from like a used Spend or something like that. I think it was just kind of a new business. So it's pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, and again, a great name for financial service. You think of rewards. That's the first thing I think of is you get rewarded for what you spend. And then the very first line under the name is earn up to 4% back in USDC. So they basically are using that for part of that is for a reward system, which is the very first thing I thought of.
Our next one here is also crypto related. So what's number 9?
This is abtc.com, and the seller on that very well known in the industry, obviously, Andrew Rosner. What was interesting must have been from Andrew's private portfolio because his company, of course, is Media Options, been a leading broker forever and ever. I think they've won 7 consecutive Escrow awards for top dollar volume on the Escrow platform. But Andrew made the sale through Afternic, a really nice sale at $699,000. I should just say 700,000. I guess but these $699,999.
Yeah. So Andrew talked about this on his show, Domain Sherpa. The buyer is actually this company, this crypto company, ABTC, that was co-founded by Eric Trump, so son of Donald Trump. And so, wow. I mean, you look at a 4-letter domain like this, yes, it has BTC in it, but this was a phenomenal sale. And Andrew acquired it. Andrew acquired it in 2020. Don't know how much he paid for it, but, I'm sure he profited from it. So,
yeah. One thing I should say about Andrew, while his name has come up here, I mentioned earlier about we only get publicly reported sales. Media Options does some crazy big sales, but their policy is not to report them virtually ever unless they're made public through some other form. For example, maybe a public company bought the name and it shows up in an SEC filing. But he is party to a lot of very, very big sales and would be all over the place, just like Andrew and Braden and some of the other people that we talk a lot about if they reported their sales publicly. And by the way, Andrew also, Rosner, is the subject of one of the more interesting cover stories that I think we published at DNJournal. The traffic to it's really amazing, but he has an incredible life story that you can find in our archive if you're interested in that.
Yeah, if you want to learn about the fishmongering business, go back and take a look at that.
Amazing? So. I started out pretty proudly. Started out as a fishmonger, which is brokering sales of seafood, and whatever he learned in that brokerage business, he certainly was able to translate to domain names.
Yeah. Tie at number 10. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, that's what caught my eye next here. Cloud.ai. Which was James Booth did this sale. He's at domainbooth.com, and also another young broker who has a phenomenal track record. He sold that through GoDaddy at $600,000, and matching that to tie for 10th place on the current top 10 for 2025 is Pack.com. And that again, Mark Goriofi closed that sale for Cedo. So 2 quite different domains names there. I actually don't know I was going to glance at those 2 and ran out of time today. What's going on with those 2 names?
Neither has been developed. Pack.com has, kind of a password protection thing like commerce.com. So someone's building that. But as with most names today, it has the automatic whois privacy, and we don't know who bought cloud.ai either. So those are ones to keep an eye on. I suspect those will be developed sometime this year. Although Pack was in January, you reported it, and they're still working on it. So it'll be really interesting to see there. So we could look at the kind of final few kind of quickly. But you had another thought on that one?
No, just on Pack. It's just I was thinking that's a name that could go in a lot of different directions. I could see a lot of people that would be well worth the money to. So it's a very, very nice domain name.
Absolutely. So we had, of course, a tie here at number 10. So that jumps us to number 12. What was that?
Number 12, dollars.com. If you ever wondered what dollars.com, we know the exact number in dollars now. That was 500,000 of them through Cedo. And that again was Mark Goriofi, who we talked about earlier.
Yeah. And that was a recent one that has not been developed yet. So we'll keep an eye on that. And then we have a 2-word, I guess you could call it a compound word or brand at number 13.
Yeah, I think I had to look that up when the sale was made. Fan base, I've seen it both ways or as one word. We charted it as one because I think that's the way the buyer is using it. But fanbase.com sold for $431,400, and that was sold on a new aftermarket platform based in Europe at fruits.co. You had looked at that site. What did you find on that?
Yeah, fanbase.com is being used. It's a blockchain powered kind of creator marketplace or a way for creators to make money. It's not 100% clear to me why it needs blockchain and crypto to do it, but that's what they're doing with it. So fanbase.com is where you can find out more about that.
Then the next one is one that had a great story behind it. It's carbonenergy.com at $400,000. And that was sold by Nametra through Aftonic. And the owner of Nametra had bought that name. He said back, we wrote a little post about it. I'd have to go back and find the number, but he had held it for 18 years, waiting for the right buyer to come along as that the carbon energy technology developed. And it's become a pretty big thing now. At $400,000, the question people always have is how, if they bought a name very inexpensively, which in his case, it seems to me it might have been under $1,000, but you can find the number online, how they don't sell it at an intermediate level along the way. Maybe just didn't have an offer, but how do you get it to 400? And then that's where it goes. But it was an amazing sale, and I was so happy for the buyer who held it that long and rewarded in the end for its patience on a good domain.
To get 400,000, you've got to turn down 300,000, which is pretty gutsy. I just found your article. He paid $105 for this.
That's what I was thinking. And I said, I'm thinking, no, that can't be right. But there you go. That's why people love the business so much. I guess unfortunate in a way that people think that's an everyday occurrence. But no, that's a real rarity. But miracles do happen. And again, the vast majority of humanity would not have the patience and perseverance to hold it as many years as it took to get the payoff that he did. But kudos to him.
Right. Let's see here. And then to finish off here, we've got a tie at number 15 as well.
Yep, and there's Braden again at $375,000 for a great .org sale, a one-letter.org, r.org. I should have bid on that now. If I was Ron, I would have come up about 374,000 short, I'm afraid, on that 375K sale. And that was under Braden's company name as Illegal Brand Marketing, so that's how you see him on the charts. Great .org sale for him, and that tied tires.co.uk, and that's the UK spelling of tires, TYRES.co.uk. Also a great CCTLD sale that Cito had made back in February. It was actually transacted in pounds, 300,000 pounds, which at the time, it varies, of course, but at the time that was exactly $375,000. So that's why we have a tie there at 15.
Believe it or not, they're going to sell tires on that site. Strange thing.
It's one of those things that reminds me of the .com bubble in 2000, where everybody was rushing into e-commerce and pet food companies. How are they going to mail 50-pound bags of pet food through the mail and make money at that? The tires are even worse.
Well, there is a very popular business called Tire Rack. I assume they're still around. That does a lot of money. They figured out how to ship these things. So.
Or I guess you could also work a deal with local affiliates to advertise for them. I haven't seen the site exactly what they've done with it, but if you were in America and you had tires.com, you'd have a wonderful, and our spelling, obviously, you'd have a great name too. So it would be well worth that as well.
So what's your take here? Do you think we're going to see a similar volume here or splash in the second half of the year?
I haven't seen anything to make me think that it's going to tail off. Obviously, at this point in time, there's a lot of stuff going on in the general economy with tariffs that can affect businesses, in various ways, depending on where their exposure is at. A lot of small businesses who source from some of these countries that have been getting hit by high tariffs have gone out of business or are worried that they're going to. So, the stock market, we really haven't seen an issue there yet. So there's a lot of global stuff going on that could blow up any prediction that we might make. Assuming that things don't change a whole lot from where we are, I think we're going to continue to do well. And I know for a fact that there are some more really big sales that we would normally call outliers that are coming down the pike that are already done and are going to get announced. It's just a matter of contractual things of when some of these things can come out. But there's a lot of stuff happening on the high end that is also encouraging. So I'm going into it very optimistic about seeing another strong 6 months here.
Yeah.
If nothing upsets the apple cart.
Well, we'll see. Well, again, everyone listening, you can go to DNJournal.com and see this list and, of course, get Ron's reports that come out every other week. You can also subscribe and he'll send you an email when those come out. So, Ron, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
I always enjoy it, Andrew, and I'll look forward to see you in person again. I guess NamesCon will be the next time, but thank you so much as well. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. That's a wrap on this week's Domain Name Wire podcast. You can listen to all previous episodes at dnw.com/podcast or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.